Okay. You submitted.
I did push my part, but not in the side. It's not in the side.
Where did you submit the homework?
On my GitHub.
Okay. Can you paste the link on Slack? Yeah. You have submitted.
I have submitted only the first part. The third part I didn't submit because I have doubts in the question.
You haven't submitted. Okay.
No.
You couldn't do it, or you haven't
Well, I'm
submitted.
still working on it because there were a lot of confusion in the homework this time, and we couldn't do a study group, so
Okay.
I'm stuck on the bottom.
I didn't do it, no.
Okay.
But I've tried, but I don't know.
Okay.
I feel it completed.
Like, did you do the first step?
No,
Okay.
I always start from the second.
Okay. Well, maybe that's part of the problem. Just saying, but I think we had this discussion last weekend as well. Yeah. About you submitting, you. Okay, you just submitted.
How are we going to do it? Are we going through? Do you have questions for? I think we just start at the top, and then we'll take questions on things you don't understand. So, what do you think? The first, how did you manage this? The first.
Well, you take values to a starting value and an ending value, and then you display an array between two values, and then you set callback operations like three callback and 5 callback, and then you make an operation for 2 values that you take by arguments from the function, and then you generate an array with the you have to decide whether the number is divisible by 3 or 5, and then you have to create an array. The second part is something that I couldn't get through because I was couldn't make a logic. How should I reiterate and then display the array with the by calling the callback? Like if the number is divisible by 3 or 5, then I make another array from it.
Okay. So
did a lot of you have problems understanding the homework this time?
Yes. It took me 4 days to figure out what it was actually.
yeah.
Should try to. Okay.
Like this time it was a bit clear from the example. So this is something we want to see what it's actually saying, because sometimes it's very hard to understand what the words are about. How do we have to make a program? How do we have to solve the problem?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, what do you guys understand with callback functions for now? Let's start with that. Like, what does it mean, a callback function?
Callback.
Yeah.
It's like you create a function, and then you will not run it until you will say something like an event that's gonna happen, like set timeout for 30 seconds, 3 seconds, and then it will start to run. It will not run before. You will do an action, you will do something. Is it right?
Does anyone else have another explanation?
it's kind of an operation that we add to our library, and then we call it back whenever we need it. Is that? Does that make sense?
Let's hear all the opinions first. Somebody else has an explanation.
And maybe it's a function you call within a function. I mean, it's part of a parameter where in a function, it's like somewhere you use it inside a function. You call it that. So when you need to use it, you just call it, and then you can use it in any other functions.
Okay. Any other definitions?
Same, but the function call inside the function, when that function is finished.
Okay. So you basically gradually gotten closer to the definition. So the example which you said about for set timeout, right? So set timeout takes 2 parameters. One is the delay, how much you want to wait, and then a function. And that's where mostly callback functions as a concept come from. It's a function which is taken as a parameter, right? And so that function generally is run at the end of another function. And usually, if you think about like the word call back, right? So you call that function which you took in the parameter, and you usually give it a value, which is a way of passing back the result of the computations of another function, right? Does it make sense? Or
Like in the example, I think there was create a function called say3 and say5 that was as a parameter of the 3-5 function, the 3 callback, 5 callback. So when you call that function, you go inside the 3-5 function. So you just taking the parameter. Huh?
Function is a function.
Within a parameter of that function. Now, when you call that function, this function is inside the parameter of this function.
So it's like a function in a function.
yes and no. The main thing is not that it's a function inside a function. The main thing is that what we didn't actually discuss last time, which is to do with asynchronous execution.
When I say function in a function, because it's passed in another function, right?
So like, let's start with what you're trying to achieve, and then see like the ways in which you can achieve it, right? What you want to achieve is that something happens in reaction to something else happening, right? So you say, okay, if this thing happens, then I want you to run this function. That's why you're passing this function as a parameter to something else, right? And I mean, when you say a parameter, then it only can be another function, right? So look, so you can still, what would not be a callback would be if you, in the parameter, you invoke the function, right? Instead of passing just the name of the function that you want to run, you invoke it. So the thing runs right away, and then it gets passed down, which is a mistake which a lot of you guys made in class, last class, if you remember, when you were trying to do set timeout, you were calling the function in the set timeout parameter. That won't be a callback because that would happen first, and then the value would be sent to other function. The function that you're trying to run, like set timeout, would never get, the chance to run the other thing at a point, at an arbitrary point. That's what we mean by asynchronous execution. So like when you're writing code right now, right, everything is happening like this, right? Top to bottom, top to bottom. But like if you think, we didn't again discuss, and we'll do a bit more discussion about this in class today, is that when you went into events, right? So you could say, okay, on click, do this, right? But no matter if you wrote it at the top or at the bottom, it ran only when a click happened. That means that it's not a synchronous execution. It happens in response to something else. Okay. So that's what callbacks are very useful for, because that's the, really the only way you can say, okay, do this at a certain point if something else happens. So that's why you pass the function as a parameter, kind of connected to basically a later point in the future. It's like, let's say, I write a, letter and with some instructions, and I put it in an envelope, and if I give it to you, read this when I'm dead or something.
Yeah, exactly.
So you will open it and you will read it then. I wrote that thing way before, and like the envelope is like the name of the function. And then what happens is when you open the envelope and read and start doing it, it's pretty much, yeah, okay.
Do you want me to explain the solution I have up here? It's the same that you just explained, just in an example. And I'll just zoom in. Can you see it now? Like this? So I've created a function up here, and I'm calling the function down here. And let's take this away. I'll remove stuff from it to make it simpler. So no, you can see the pattern. I have a function up here, and I'm calling it down here. And up here, I take two functions here. And it says nowhere that it is functions, it's just a convention. So the start value you think is a number, and this is a function as a function. And in order to pass these functions, we do this down here, and we can do it, whoops. I can do it once, or I can do it twice, I can do it a lot of times. And I can do it without these functions doing anything. The simplest example is that I give two functions, and can you see this is an arrow function? Are you okay with that? Mm-hmm. This is an arrow function I give, and it takes one parameter, and when it executes, it logs something, but right now it does nothing. So this is the most simple example. And if we call this, and if we, do like this, and we execute, nothing happens. But if I supply this function down here, it will print something, and it will take a value. But the only reason it executes is because it's called here, right? This is the third argument to this function, or the third parameter, and it's the third down here. So they are tied together because of the precision in the arguments. So the reason this is called callback 3 is because it's named up here, but the caller down here has not given it a name. We could do that by taking the function here. We could call it myfunc, declare it here, right? And then we pass it along down here. And it's executed in here. If we remove this statement, nothing is printed at all. And we can call it as many times we want in this function up here. So it's kind of an agreement between those two functions, or the function up there and the call down here. This function supplies some functionality that you can say for each element in this array you will be called. So the first function, callback 3, is called every third time, and the second function is called every fifth time down here. Maybe are you familiar with this kind of notation?
The
modulo.
Reminder?
Yeah, okay, perfectly. So it's not confusing to you that it's called every 3 times or every 5 times. That's okay, perfect. So I think that might be confusing is when if you give the function like a variable, you could accidentally execute the function here. Okay? And this is not what you want. You want to give a function to the top function up here. You don't want to execute something, because
in that case, my function is going to say that it's not a function.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. When you run it, it says div3 undefined. And where does it do that?
I think you have to uncomment that line, line number 12. Then you'll get the error.
Oh yeah, I think actually it's the error is here. I could call okay. So the error is kind of strange. Actually, what I'm doing, I'm calling down here, and I don't give a parameter. So that's why it's saying div3 is undefined.
Oh yeah.
And when you come up here, yeah. So is this too confusing, or do you understand this?
If it's confusing, then say so. We'll go through this.
I will explain it gladly again.
Like again?
Yeah. Do you want to see it from the start, or?
Yes, like as a tree, and how you branch it down.
As a tree?
Yeah, like with the branches and everything. Like how do you like make the arguments inside the function, then you declare them outside?
If you can make an example, so where we
can you make a map
use
of
this kind of function.
I think I'll just take this example and code it from scratch.
Yes.
Because then I'll have to explain everything to you.
No, you know what I'm saying. It's really good if it's fast. If you just take this you have installed it and you run it, and from the console you run the debug. So every time you see what calling this, what calling that, and you can explain that.
I think it's hard for me to explain it that way because. Yeah, there's a lot of information.
Just like
I think we
map
can
on the
do it
whiteboard
from
of what you're doing. Like example, you declare the function 3.5 with four arguments, and then
I think I'll just do it from scratch and then ask a question when there's something you don't understand because it's easier for me to do it that way.
Give an example where we can use this kind of function.
We'll come to that later in the class.
Yeah.
So the thing is, first you need to understand the concept, and then we'll talk about the application. Sometimes you can do it in the reverse way, but
I agree with you. But sometimes it's good effort to write it.
Yeah, to see the result of the
where we are going to use this kind of function.
The thing is, that's
then
why
we can have an imagination from that.
Yeah, but actually you have already seen it.
Yeah, set timeout last class.
Okay.
That was the application, right? It took a callback function, and also on click. That also took a callback function. So we have taken, if it's not sticking now, then let's go through like the basic concept.
The difficulty here is that you are actually doing something with the callback function. In the other examples, you're just writing the part down here where you call.
Yeah.
You use the 3.5. When you give a callback to a button, the button is called at some time. But you're not doing the hard work of calling the function at the right time. This is where you're learning to take a callback and doing something with it. Okay, so it's a little harder to come up with an example where it's useful, but imagine that you were imagine that you were the browser, and you will take a callback when you are the button, and you will take a callback and you'll call that function every time the button is pressed. And if an error happens, you will call the error callback, and if no error happens, you will call the normal callback. So try to keep that in mind, and then I think I'll just go through because and then you can come up with questions.
So Nikhil is going to go relatively fast. Look at it, and as soon as there's something which you don't understand, it's okay, just interrupt.
Yeah.
I think what you're about to do is a very thing you already coded, right? I think what you're about to do is a very thing you've already coded.
Yeah.
So maybe rather than writing it from the very start again, you can just...
It's fine, it won't take that long. Just everyone pay attention.
It's okay, but you'll just stop me when you don't understand something. And if you otherwise, so the first thing I'll do is I'll have to create an array, right? So I'll take two parameters. I'll take the start value and I'll take the end value. Okay. So I'll console log these two because it makes it easier for me. So I'll start to console log this value, and nothing happens when I execute it, right? Because I haven't called it. So let's use now we are making some kind of service of
spelling mistakes. It's just a mistake.
Oh, sorry. Why didn't it? Okay, like this.
Yeah.
So when you're making some kind of service for other people at some time, and you will do that a lot. And when you do that, you try to imagine how is this used. So this is a very simple example. So try to use it. And the way to use a function is just calling it. So I'll call the function and see what happens. And it prints undefined.
Declaring the parameter.
And I don't give a parameter. Okay, so let's start by that. Let's give it 3 and 4. 3. Okay. So no confusing stuff here at all. So I'll make an array, And actually, I think you don't. That's no problem for you. So I'll just copy paste that. Right? No problem at all, right? And I'll print this array. Now I'll remove this and see, okay, everything is working. This is kind of tedious, but this is the way you should do it, because you have to build up your code from small building blocks and always keep checking if it works. So it's a kind of tedious way to do it, but it's the way that works, at least for me, and I think also will work for you. Okay, so now the hard stuff is coming. We are supposed to print something every third time, every fifth time. So that is kind of the same. So it's not, let's just do it every 3 times. So we'll have to loop over this array. And you see down here, I use a for each. And just to let you show you, I used up here, I couldn't use a for each for it because I created an array. I didn't have any array to loop over. But down here I have an array, I'll loop over that. And now, right now, actually, we are creating a callback. We are giving for each a callback now. And somewhere, some person have written that for each function. And the person received a function that should be called every time the array, for every element in the array. And I think you can imagine that you could do that, right? It's not that complicated. Actually, we're doing that right now. We are taking an array, or we are creating an array, and for every piece of the array, we are calling some callback. But not every, actually, just every third. So actually, we're just creating for each right now, kind of. So a very simple thing to do is we could take okay, so in here we will have a function. Okay, and in the for each we get something here. We get the element, I'll just call it E or L, and we can print it here. And what do we have? We just have a for each function. We want to do something else. We want to only print at some point 3 like this, right? And we're kind of there now. We just make another example. Yes. And if we want to call this function, 2 times, we can call it 10 and 100. And it prints to 100, and then it goes on to doing this work, right? So now it's kind of working, but what we do is we do the same thing every single time. We can only console log. That's the only thing we can do. So now we want to be able to customize this. We don't want to console log every time. So we give a callback. We let the user of this function decide what to happen. And the way to do that is take a callback. Then the user can decide that at some time. And actually, this is very simple. We'll just say we take a function up here. And I'll just make it call it callback. And this is a function like I declared a function down here, const my function.
Yeah, but inside that for each now you're not making anymore. It's not anymore an array now.
It's not an array. No, I'm not making an array. I just
in this case you're creating an empty array for nothing.
Actually,
if you don't push it inside anything, it's just an extra array that you're calling.
Yeah, you could say I create an array and then loop over it and then I throw it away. So it's
because what it's calling in the console log is just the element. It's not the element inside the array.
So
you're not pushing the elements inside the array anyway.
Is your point that actually I could do this just by I could move it up here and just get rid of the array altogether. Is this your point?
No, if you try to console it.
Run this?
Yeah.
Callback.
No, because it's not defined. Because that was
You
the
have to
parameter you
call
got
I.
in for each.
But elm is the same as I, right?
Yeah.
So this does the same. It should do the same. But okay,
don't pass
we
it.
don't have the callback yet. So actually, what we did down there was print I.
Yeah.
So it does the same. So was this?
No. What I'm saying is, you see, the exercise was saying to create an empty array and push inside
Yeah.
the element.
Yeah.
So when you do the for, okay, you're just checking inside the array, okay, the element, and you console only the element.
Yeah.
So they are outside the array.
Yeah.
So if you do push, you pushing the empty array that you have created before.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, it's just an empty array that you create for nothing. That's what I think. I mean,
Up here.
yeah, I think you should the array push I. It should be inside the if.
Like this.
You know what I'm saying?
No. If you undo it now, but just
Yeah, you do the curly bracket on the if. And
instead
if
of
you
console
divide by 3,
you do.
you push it in the array. So the array is done for something. I mean, I think.
Like this?
The exercise
Yeah.
says like that. Otherwise, it's just an empty array that you're creating. You know what I'm saying? With the semicolon in the console.
I'm sorry, but I don't follow.
Okay, just make the semicolon in the console.
The semicolon.
Yeah, and after the console log, and run the okay, you see. No, after the console log, you do the array push I.
Like this.
Yeah. Okay, I don't get it. You know what I'm.
And then you
what I'm
return
saying?
array. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. You
was
should
just
push it inside the array. Because if you do I index of, type of, you will say number,
Yeah.
not array. So
save
because
we
the
save
actual-
file.
I'm.
create an array with inside the numbers.
Should call, but it doesn't need to return anything, right? It doesn't say. The
Yeah,
function
inside the for you put let array.
The function should generate an array containing values from start to end. Should iterate over the array and call over the second argument. Call over. So what that callback function does, though, is not particularly specified. It could also create another array, but it doesn't need to.
Okay, so there is no need to create generate an array. There is no need at the end. I'm
No.
just asking,
Yeah.
because-
Okay. Yeah, but you're correct in that, because this is what we changed the code to this, and instead of putting an array here, we could cancel log I here. So you're correct, and we don't need that array. I don't know why I did it, but I didn't think about it.
Yeah,
I
it's correct, but I'm just saying because the
Yeah.
said to create an array. So you should from your numbers inside the array that you have created.
Yep.
You push the new array.
Yeah.
Like for each element, make it another array.
Okay.
Because for each it doesn't create a new array.
But it was fine what you were doing because it
Yeah.
was pretty much procedural according to generate, iterate. and
Okay.
call.
Okay.
I
Then
understand.
I'm so
Okay.
sorry for this.
let's continue from with the callback. So we reached this point where we're doing something custom, but we want the user to be able to do his own work. So instead we'll instead of doing our console log, we will call this callback with the element, and we'll remove this, and nothing happens. Callback. Because I didn't give a callback.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually we could give a very simple callback. We know Do you know a function that prints to the console log? So could we give that callback here? Could we do this?
Yeah.
We could actually. So now you're not calling the console log. You're actually giving it to the function which calls it. So you're passing along a function. This is a built-in function, and you can do that like you can do it with your own functions.
Does this make sense? This part?
No, the console log didn't make any sense.
No, it's a little hard to get around because you're used to just calling this function.
Yes.
But you could take this function and give it to the other function, and it would call it.
So console.log is the name of the function, right?
Yes.
So if you just go above where the callback is happening.
So when you set it as a parameter, it will look at it and
exactly.
then call it.
Yeah, if you go above more.
It will change it as console.log
Yeah.
of I.
Yeah. So if you think of like when you have start val, end val, and callback, instead of callback, if you see console log, right there, then when you see callback I happening, it's basically console log I happening.
Is it like a parameter now?
Yeah. That's the flexibility which you get with this pattern. So
So originally that's a function, and when you call by the function, everything is just a parameter. So console.log is a parameter.
exactly.
That's what it reflects to callback because
It becomes the argument that you get. So what was your name?
Omid?
Amit, yeah.
Yes.
So this is really like hard to kind of like build an example around
Yeah.
because it doesn't really do something which you can't do otherwise,
But
right?
I understand where I can use it.
If you understand that you can do that, then you will start to see the opportunities to use it.
Yeah. Now I can understand
Okay.
where I can use it.
We will definitely use it in today later on. So just
Hang on a second.
we have to go.
No,
Yeah.
when he has started to write from the scratch, I understand it.
Okay.
It's easier to understand.
Please ask more questions if you don't understand it, because this is a very important topic and it's hard to get. And it's better that you understand it when we go on, because you will learn more what we explain later.
I have one question.
Yeah.
It's kind of stupid.
No, it's okay.
Is this about making the code interactive with the user?
No, this is about giving you better control over the code when you plan it. Because the thing is, like within a function, you can encounter, you can encapsulate a lot more things than you can do just with passing variables. So if you think like if you could only control another function just with saying this parameter, that parameter, this, you can't really change what it does fundamentally so much. You can have if statements which look at, okay, if this is that, do this, this is that, do that. But once you start passing functions in, then you're taking it to like another level of like what can happen after, what can be connected to what, right?
Yeah. Other questions?
I was just curious, what if the console log, what if we remove the free intent, what is the result of that? Like just having the console log?
Like this?
Okay.
Oh no, because you have to define all of the parameters.
Yeah, the point is that console log gets assigned to start value.
Yeah.
And that doesn't make any sense, because I think that it is this function thinks that it's a number, but here down it is a function. So that doesn't make any sense.
You can use this function for sorting, for alphabet or numbers like this. You can use for this kind of thing as well.
Array.sort exactly does that. It takes a function which gives you a custom comparator.
Yeah.
Should we take that example,
For example,
or
you can give some information and sort the people by the age or by the first name or whatever.
I just want to say, maybe you could help others to understand when you did, so like the first part, the function is what it is, then the second part when you added 3, 5, and add 3 and 10, and console.log. So at that point when you do the callback, so 3 is the start value, 10 is the end value, so it becomes let I equals to 3, and I less than or equals to 10. So then the console.log is not a callback. So when you have callback into I, it becomes console.log into I. So each time it loops over, Like, yeah, so if you have, it starts with 3. So it takes let I equals 3. Is 3 divisible by 3? Yes. It prints 3. Is it takes the next value 4. It just loops over and prints the end result if it matches to the function.
That's the point.
So just consider the first function to be the function, and the second one where they have the callback is still functional with the parameters. Everything becomes a parameter. So it just has to match up with the original function.
Yeah.
But in this case, the 3.5 is not even called. The function is not even called.
This is called there.
But it doesn't satisfy all the parameters, even if you do.
It will still be called.
Actually,
if you do,
let's see if it's called because now there's an error, and where does the program stop? That's a good question. So let's console log something in here and see if it gets output. So actually, it does get output. So where is the problem?
So it shouldn't be all the parameter code in the function, no?
No, the problem is you didn't give the start value and end value.
But if I say start val here, it says I have something.
Nothing.
I have something.
No.
I have something. I have a function. But when I use it down here, what happens? You don't need to know what happens because this should not happen. But actually, I think it won't call at all. But it might. I can't figure out.
No.
It doesn't even loop once. And maybe it's because that.
But if you just do after the let array, you do let const stval equal 2 or 3, whatever, and then you call the constant.
Sorry, because when you are here, you should give the number to this call.
So that's what we should do, right?
Yeah.
But you have to understand what happens, like when you don't, because often you will make this kind of errors yourself.
Yeah.
When you go and you're trying to change the parameters that you take and you forgot to change how you're invoking it.
Yeah.
So what happens is what we call that the parameters get mapped incorrectly.
Yeah.
Your function takes more or less parameters or different parameters than what you're trying to call it with. Now with most programming languages, it will break. It will give you a hard error if you try to do that. JavaScript is very permissive, so it doesn't. So it also makes it a little bit weirder to understand when these kind of errors happen. So it's a pretty good example of being quite difficult to debug at this point.
Yeah. If you do a callback and you, for example, you don't give ordinarily you declare a function with 3 parameters, you do a callback and you don't give some more parameters.
You can give it no parameters at all, and it will then depend on what the callback depends on. So it may do something, might not do anything. Yeah. It really comes down to what the function, how it executes.
And we could, another thing we just that is in this topic, we could give it a set of default values, and it's usually done like this. We'll say start val equals.
Now, because we're in. I don't know, because we're writing ES6, you can do it in the parameters themselves.
Yeah, okay. So we can do it up here. Let's just check if that's...
Yeah, let's just try it just fine.
See, like this. I don't know. Can we do it with a function?
Yeah.
We can?
Yeah. If I don't know if it's ES6 or 7, but you can do it.
Let's try to see if this happens. What we want to do is say, if you don't give any parameters down here, we have a set of defaults. So we'll start from, let's say, 0, and then to 10, and then the default action to do is to console log. Let's see if this works. I'm not sure. It works. Perfect.
But why it's written the 0 as well?
0? The 0?
Yeah, because 0 is divisible by 3.
0, is divisible by 3.
3 into 0, 0.
Yeah. Okay. So now we can call it a function. Actually, it has a default something, and we can give the problem with it is what do we want if we want to make a custom function? We want to give this a custom function. We have the problem that we have to specify the numbers from here, and that's the drawback by this of this pattern. You cannot. You'll have to specify all arguments up to. Otherwise, it wouldn't know what you give it. But you can say, let's take from.
I mean, you're already calling it up, right? You're calling it twice.
I'm calling it. I'll just remove this.
It was coming.
No, in the top.
In the top, you're already giving the arguments back.
That's only a default value.
This
That
is a
happens
default
if
value.
Nothing is passed.
It's only called the function without any argument.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it doesn't hurt if you have the default there all the time.
Yes, it doesn't hurt, but look, so that also means that the function will more or less run each time, no matter which parameters you give. Depending on use case, that may or may not be a nice thing. Sometimes you don't want it to run. In any case, sometimes you want it.
So each time you do a call, that one will always run first.
I mean, even if you don't give any values, it will run now.
No, I mean like if you do a call like do 3400 console as well.
If I give a callback down here, a third parameter,
Yeah.
this is totally ignored.
Yeah.
It's behaving like this wasn't there at all. It won't call it. It won't do anything about it. It will just use the callback I give it. That's the way JavaScript is.
You mean it follows the latest callback that you put maybe it doesn't, or it's gonna be like the one that you first defined?
It will use the callback that I define when I call the function.
Oh.
And if I call the function multiple times, it will. These two calls are separated. They have actually nothing to do with each other. So if I give a callback up here,
Then it executes that one.
again. Okay, so if I give a callback up here, the call down below wouldn't know about it at all. So the function remembers nothing.
I have a question.
Yeah?
And when you call the function the second time, that 34 at which argument applies?
Excuse me?
Like, it's a 3.5 has a starting value, ending value, and callback, right?
Yeah.
When you call 3.5 and then 34, at which argument does it apply?
Yeah, so this is kind of a strange thing to do because this is an error, isn't it? Or at least we're not. This makes no sense that we start at 34 and end at 10.
Yeah.
Is that your point?
No, like.
Yeah,
So when there's only one value after you call it, it's always for the first argument.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Without exception.
So
Yeah.
the order should be.
So the order matters.
Yeah. The order is very important.
So in this case, if you run the function, you shouldn't get anything because 34 is bigger than 10. Yes.
Yeah. So it will start the loop, but immediately it realizes that it has to end it. So when we execute it right like here, nothing happens.
Why doesn't it go like backwards?
That's the way it's.
Oh, it's because I is plus plus.
Yeah.
And if you make it minus minus, will it actually go
Yeah.
backwards?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nothing.
That the start value has to be the end
Bigger or
value.
equal than end value.
But
Bigger or equal than end value.
no, but it shouldn't
Yeah, it
execute
would be
the
greater than
condition.
equal to 10.
Yeah, because you'll have to change this also. The end value have to be less than something, right? So you have to change both things. Okay, now I'm confused.
It has to be bigger.
I should be bigger than.
What was the?
No. Yes, bigger.
This is the original, so it has to be bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So now it goes
But
down.
even though if you leave it as it is, it should give you back. You make the if because if you put for the console, they will give you back only 34.
From this one
After the if,
here.
yeah, the console log I.
Yeah. So what happens?
No,
Why
because
not?
because
right? It doesn't run even once because it doesn't satisfy I less than n val.
This
It
is the
doesn't
important
satisfy,
thing
it
here.
doesn't run.
End
Because-
value is 10
Yeah.
and I is
So
34.
the first time,
Yeah.
the first time has to be true.
Each time has to be true.
No,
Each
but
of
I
the
mean,
times.
there is a time that you will end the loop. So
It can run at
n
it
plus
can-
1, it can be
It can
false.
end at the first time itself.
So the first time has to be true.
Yes.
So
All the times have to be true. Yeah.
Okay.
Alright, we've deviated quite a lot, so we'll go back to
Yeah.
yeah.
But I hope you learned a lot, and I appreciate you coming all the questions. This is how you're going to learn it, and it's you're getting along quite well. Okay, so I'll just undo all this.
Oh, wish you could share this code with us.
Yeah, but it's your homework.
Yeah.
So actually, what we want you to do is be able to write this code yourself. That is the point. That you want this code from me is we want to get around that. We want you to be able to write it yourself. So we want you to ask questions until you think this is actually an easy example to write. And try and find the simple example as possible. You can and try to get it work. If you can't, ask us. That's the way you're going to learn it. Not copying what is here, because this is not particularly complicated. You actually have almost all of the stuff you need to know to do it. Okay?
It is hard to link with each other.
Yeah, it is, and that's you have to sit and interact with the code.
Yeah.
That's the only way you're going to learn it. You can't read up here, and nobody have learned coding by reading code. Everybody have sit down and get annoyed on the code. Okay? Are we going into the curriculum for today?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want this or
Yeah.
should we have a little break? It's 1 o'clock.
Can we go to lunch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we have time enough to eat that.
Okay.
So,
Ah, okay.
Stop.